Menscape The Podcast with Carl.J. Ashley.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the August Menscape The Podcast with the one and only Mr. Daniel Rampling. How are you doing?
I'm great. Yeah, I feel really good. Good evening.
Thanks.
Busy day today, bit of a
board.
hectic day, but I feel good. Yeah.
Busy times, right?
Yeah, great. This summer's great. I'm a DJ, so yeah, after 2 years of having our lives stolen by the globalists and the agenda, work is really good, and I raise the vibration through music and raise the frequency. So yeah, work is great. High vibration, keep the vibration high. That's what this is about.
So, as a lover of house music since back in the day, you don't need any introduction to me, but for anyone that doesn't know you, tell us a bit about yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
Okay, I'm a DJ, producer, events promoter, sovereign being, and activist. And the activist part of me has really taken shape, like many people, over the last 3 years of COVID.
Right.
So, and I stand in the truth, and I'm a critical thinker. And
careful now.
yeah. They can try and cancel thinking, but they'll never cancel our thinking. So I've been a DJ for 35 years, and it's my life. I love music. I was one of the early pioneers of the acid house scene in the UK,
right?
And created a club called Shoom, which was the catalyst for the rave scene. That's how my career and journey began in music. And
whereabouts was that, Danny?
That was in London, in Southwark, in an industrial area. It was a small fitness centre, held 300 people, strobes, lights, and a big reggae sound system. Norman J's brother, Norman J, formerly the Rare Groove DJ, MBE, his brother Joey J. I loved the bass on his reggae system, and that was the in-house system for Shoom in the basement. So it was a hot, sweaty basement, the energy in that room was profound and quite remarkably unique. And it was about collective consciousness. And really that was the blueprint for the rave scene that followed. And
You're talking early 80s there, about 83, 84, 86?
No. 1987, 88. 88, 89, we collectively shaped the what is termed as the second summer of love, where the class system was, deconstructed, everything melded together, kind of sexuality, everything. And there was a real strong feeling of hope, unity, optimism, and love. And that's what the movement was about. It was apolitical. We'd come out the other side of Thatcher's Britain, or we were still in Thatcher's Britain. Yeah. We didn't want to know about Thatcher's politics. We just completely removed ourselves from that and created our own opportunity and our own industry. Previous to that, like myself, many people, we'd been, through difficult times with work. It was high unemployment time back then in the mid 80s, and a lot of disparity as well. At the same time, a lot of opportunity, but we're seeing that now. This is what's going on now, but it's on stealth. So the timing of that movement was perfect, and it was revolutionary without being political. We just got on and did our own thing and shared the love.
I want to put a shout out to a mate of mine, Chris Harrison, or DJ Harrison C, as he's known. He's one of my clients for the Right Coach, where I have a hobby business that I've done helping people around the world write their own books. And he's writing a book called The History of House Music.
Great.
And we just finished a chapter there not even half an hour ago, where he's talking about the Roland machines, the TR-303 and the TB-808 and 909. And the birth of sort of house music coming from the clubs of New York to the clubs of Chicago, Frankie Knuckles, who everybody's heard of, but then lesser names that maybe people haven't heard of. And then that sort of being influenced by the acid house music scene, influenced by the drum machines that had this kind of squelchy kind of noise, that they were actually a commercial failure. And so they sold them off cheap and people picked them up. And all of a sudden you've got the birth of a genre by accident. It's just amazing. And it's my pleasure and privilege and honor to work with him putting that together. Yeah,
sounds fantastic. I look forward
still
to
very
reading
much in the early 80s. There was a band called Yellow, produced a track called Oh Yeah.
And great track.
I've listened back to some of the music. They were like, I think they were a Swiss duo that were pioneers.
That's right.
In the house music scene. And so it's like I love it. It's amazing. It's beautiful to be doing that because it's very close to my heart. But even though I grew up in Manchester, I was a little bit too young to be part of the hacienda sort of generation. People just assumed that you were part of that. But I was about 15 at the time, and I don't know, did your parents let you go to nightclubs when you were 15? But mine didn't. So
no, I generally couldn't get in at 15. I tried to, though.
Yeah.
I was born to be in nightclubs. I was born at midnight, and I come alive at midnight on a Saturday night. I was born. So for the best part of my life, I've been living in nightclubs at midnight and entertaining people, and sharing the passion of music and all the enjoyment that goes with playing music and dancing and celebrating our lives.
So who were your kind of heroes musically? Did you look to sort of disco and Motown and soul like a lot of the early house pioneers?
My early influences were Mark Bolan, David Bowie, T-Rex, Gary Glitter and the Glitter Band, dare I say it, but as kids, they,
these days.
Even the Bay City Rollers and Tamla Motown. So those were the foundations of music and pop music.
Yeah.
My mother used to have the radio on in the house every day, and I was fascinated by radio, how the music and voice was being transmitted through a small box in the kitchen on the work service. So that started my passion for music at an early age.
Yeah.
And I climbed the tree of radio from pirate radio with Kiss FM to BBC Radio 1, where I held a Saturday night show for 7 years.
Yeah, that's where I would have heard you from putting the radio on before we used to go out to nightclubs in Leeds in the 90s. I was going to the likes of Up Your Ronson and Back to Basics. They were my sort of stomping ground, and the Warehouse and what have you, around about 94, 95, 96. And Pete Tong and Daniel Rampling would be playing on Radio 1 whilst the girls were putting the makeup on.
Soundtrack to the weekend, getting you ready for Friday and Saturday night out on the town.
Yeah, this was how it was.
Brilliant times, brilliant.
But for me, like very much as a young person in those days, the scene was inextricably linked with sort of recreational drugs, either taking things to get high or just to enjoy ourselves. And one of the things that came up in the book with Chris was there was people that obviously suffered and struggled with that and through that, but then there was also because it was a subculture, because it was a kind of a generation of people that were maybe disenfranchised with the world that their parents occupied. It was like we were just conditioned to turn to anything that was a mind-altering substance to escape from, like growing up in Manchester. The prevailing philosophy is it doesn't rain, it pours. Life's a bitch, you marry one, then you die. This is gallows kind of mentality. So as soon as somebody came along with something where you could either, get a bit tipsy or get a bit stoned or get a bit high, it was like, well, yeah, I'm doing that.
Yeah, we'll have some of that. That feels good. And that's what happened. It's it happened in the 60s with the 60s scene, modern rockers. It happened in the 70s and late 60s, 70s with the hippies. Every movement has had that association. Punk rock, New Romantics. So that was a more kind of it wasn't a huge fashion movement, but everything that's come along has had that association. It goes hand in hand. But a lot changed through that time. It was a wave of empathy, optimism, hope, and it really did. We changed our world from within. you know?
Yeah.
And the Berlin Wall was falling, apartheid was crumbling. It was a real time of change and optimism that, hey, you know, we're all contributing to this change that's going on in the world. And we were putting it out there. Collective consciousness, love, unity, you know, the unity was incredible. And that's what I found more recently. There are parallels, very different arena, but on all of the freedom rallies that I have attended, you know, there's a lot of love there and unity. And we're sending love out. Our hearts vibrate, and someone 20 feet away can feel the vibration of love from another human heart. So on those rallies, there was such an inclusive feeling of unity and togetherness, and all with the same idealism of freedom, and we are not complying, we are standing up for our rights. And that's powerful, really powerful.
Yeah.
And the effect it had on people, because at that time, the nightclubs had all been closed and festivals weren't happening. So it was a real release for people to go out, attend a rally. There was music at the rallies. I used to have take a speaker on my back, play music. There was a lot of music that went on at the rallies. You know, people were burning sage. It's a real collective consciousness, which I experienced and was very pivotal in that change back in 87 and 88 and 89, the Summers of Love.
Interestingly, I remember going on a family holiday to the island of Ibiza.
Yes.
I now live in Ballywire in Tipperary, which sounds a bit like Balearic and Ballywire. But in Ibiza, I was about 15 years old at the time, and the island captured my heart in a way. Obviously, at that age, I was, you know, desperate to be a man and be grown up like my dad and drink pints and shit, you know, like any other kid. But there was something just beautiful in the magic of the atmosphere of the island itself that transcended the sort of drug scene or the music scene or anything. And it was just this sense of the sunsets, the tranquility, the sunrises. There's something really beautiful about that. And then I went back the following year when I was 16, and the place was bedecked in luminous yellow, green, and pink everywhere. Yaz's Yaz and the Plastic Population, The Only Way Is Up was playing everywhere, and we were heralded like heroes just because we were from Manchester and we had these dodgy face and haircuts. And Ian Brown and the Stone Roses' Fool's Gold 12-inch remix was playing everywhere, and it was absolutely amazing. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a magical island. It has a very special, unique energy, and that's why people are so attracted to Ibiza. It is very unique, and it is an energy point. It's an energy center, the way parts of California
like
are.
lines.
Yes, exactly. And that's the special energy that Ibiza has, that's attracted since the Phoenicians and the Romans. And, you know, there's a long heritage and history of people going to Ibiza and letting their hair down and being free and liberated, and individualism and expression. It does offer a lot of freedom. It has changed in recent years, but that energy that's there is magical, and it's a beautiful island. You know, I don't go there. I go there to play, not as much as I used to, but I love the island, you know, and always will do.
Vibes.
And the beauty of the place. And it's not all about nightclubbing, Ibiza. That is a perception with some people, but it's not. There's some just wonderful beaches and coves, and the agriculture, and just everything about the island, and the colours and the clay and the soil and the sunsets and sunrises. It's magical, beautiful, and the scent of the pine and the Mediterranean. It's just it's very enticing and alluring.
They say don't go back, Danny, but I went back in 2017. With a Clare cricket team from over here. And I was saying to the taxi driver, you know, I was here 28 years ago when I was about 15 or 16, and the only thing that had changed really was it was like a yuppie culture. Everything was branded, everything had a brand on it, and everything was expensive. But the island still had that magic and that energy and that vibe. And the weather was just beautiful. There wasn't a chemtrail in the sky for days on end. You know.
Maybe the geoengineering policy is to make it beta exempt.
Well, if that's where the rich and famous hang out, I don't know.
Well, it is these days, yes. But yeah, that aside, so coming back to the present, so that's, well, in a nutshell, I suppose that's my history, an introduction. Yes.
Excellent, Danny. So I'm going to run through some quick fire questions here.
Right.
Have you ever written a book?
No, but I have the chapters laid up, and I have written sections of a book, and I will write a book, and as I said, but I don't have a plan to do that right now. I've got a lot of other things going on, but it will happen. Maybe next year, maybe the year after. I've got a lot more to achieve, and a lot more to write about. So
have you ever jumped out
there's
of a
no
plane?
rush. Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Have you ever rode a horse?
Badly.
Have you ever driven a Ferrari?
No.
Have you ever eaten an insect?
Don't
tell me you've got a bag of them there on the desk like Charlie McCready had.
No, we do not eat the bugs. No, have I ever eaten an insect? I think we all have. We sleep with our mouths open at night, so spiders get in there and all kinds of insects. So probably eaten a few hundred over the course of my lifetime, but not intentionally. No, not really my thing. And even if that was the guy, this is what they want, is saying that I don't eat a lot of meat anyway. But they want us eating the bugs, don't they? But they'll still be feasting on foie gras and Kobe beef and the finest foods known to man. The so-called self-entitled elites, these bureaucrats and villains and rogues and scarcity mindset tyrants that are attempting to impose so much upon humanity and divide us, and the corporate wealth transference and them at the hierarchy. They're just a bunch of fearful, weak, cowardly people who were interfered with as children and bullied at school. They're psychopaths, narcissists, and sociopaths, and they are weak, and we do not fear any of them. I have no fear, and everybody I know has no fear. They trade in fear. We fear no one, no man, no woman. We fear no one. And we certainly do not fear these tyrants from the Davos Collective, the Club of Rome, the World Economic Forum, these tyrants that are behind this, what we're experiencing in our daily lives right now. We are the people who stand in our truth and stand there fearlessly against these weak entities. They're subhuman. They have no compassion. They are driven by greed, power, and the lust of power and control. And they are demonic.
So would you say that they're just like you and me, only they were traumatized as kids, or would you say that there's a non-human influence there?
Well, I certainly believe that there's a non-human influence because
non-human entities involved. Yeah.
Well, there is a theory about this, yeah, that there is extraterrestrial energy that is guiding this dark agenda along. And you know what? I think you've got to keep an open mind towards those kind of theories, because that we're having all this like in the media about unidentified flying objects, and it's always been closed. But we know that part of this agenda is that's what they're going to launch, is a computer generated imagery, alien invasion to scare the living daylights out of people and force a one world government. We're coming here to save you, our one world government. But the reality of it will be another hoax that will really terrify people. I'll go out there and have a cup of tea and a Kit Kat with them if they're real. But they're not. This isn't real. This is going to be a staged alien invasion. There's so much talk of it, and the pre-programming in TV series and films and everything.
That's an interesting point. Do you remember a program in the 90s called Star Trek The Next Generation?
Great.
Captain
Love a bit of
Picard,
Star Trek.
eh? So on board the ship, then they've got like a sample person from each. So you've got like a Klingon, and you've got like a Vulcan, and you've got all these different, like a Romulan, and all this. They reckon that was more like a documentary than a fiction. You know, this is what's really going on, and it's all kind of like soft disclosure. So at the last count, there was apparently 52 different species of extraterrestrials that human governments were dealing with, and they've not made any of it public. Now, again, I'm open-minded. I'm on the fence, and not really one way or the other, until I fucking meet one in my garden. And then at that point, I'll decide, will I shit my pants or have a cup of tea with them or whatever, right? But if you're talking about what we know, what we can channel, what we can feel intuitively with our psychic development, and what we energetically feel, there's then also like physical evidence, like there's the skeletons of 22 feet giants that existed, and as much as you try and cover it up, what the fuck were 22 foot and 18 foot humans doing with humans that were 6 foot? Like physically, you're no match whatsoever. So and if you look at the depictions on the ancient sort of sacred texts of whether it's Egypt or the Mayans in South America or all over the world, there's evidence to suggest that the dinosaurs, like the Brontosaurus and the Tyrannosaurus, they were just like the pets of these 22 foot kind of human giants, you know, and with, I think it's not too ridiculous to suggest that we've been lied to about virtually everything. And I mean 95+% of everything. And once you start scratching, looking into the truth of things, the rabbit hole just gets deeper and deeper and deeper, because there practically isn't anything that we haven't been lied to. So what can we know? What can we trust is what we feel. And like you say, when you're in a gathering and a group and you're feeling that vibration of love and togetherness and freedom, energy doesn't lie.
Well, we're beings of light, and the whole extraterrestrial situation, it's just, I think it's ludicrous to believe that we're the only living beings in the whole of the universe. That's just, you know, how could that be possible? You know, and going back to that history, I mean, you know, kind of the ancient carvings depict flying craft and tall beings. You know, so what were they, just like hallucinating on some, you know, kind of mushrooms or something, or some plant? No, they're actually visitations have been going on for many, many, many thousands of years. And there's the other theory that, you know, the sea is so deep that there's, you know, this whole hollow earth theory that there are other civilizations within the earth's core. I think you have to keep an open mind to these theories, and rather than closing your mind. No, that couldn't happen. That couldn't happen.
Do you remember when they brought out the Star Wars movie that was like the fourth one? I think they called it The Phantom Menace, right?
I've never seen any Star Wars films, unfortunately.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I was a child of the 70s, right? So I grew up watching repeats of going down the Death Star and blowing it up with Luke, like. And they brought out a film in the 90s called The Phantom Menace. And there was a scene where they went under the water.
Yeah.
And they flew they swam like into like a bubble. And so they could go into this place. It was underwater, but you could breathe in it. And it was like this underwater world. And again, it was like soft disclosure. We're basically showing you this is what exists. I don't think it's that outrageous at all to think that there's worlds subterranean.
My mind is open to that as well. I think, you know, kind of being a critical thinker, and it's just like, you know, kind of keep an open mind to everything that goes on in this world. And as you just said previously, you know, a lot of history's been eradicated, covered up, you know, and that's the way of the world. But we are now in the time of truth and revelation, and that's where we're at right now. This is what's been going on the last 3 years. You know, you've got a great divide in society of people who are just oblivious or comfortably numb to everything that's going on around them, and as if the world's all normal. And it's far from normal. It's like, what is it going to take for? But Mattias Desmet, the Belgian psychology professor, writes about this in The Science of Totalitarianism, which is an essential read. And this perfectly explains, he calls it mass formation psychosis,
Right.
mass formation, where 80% of the public stay in the herd and they do not want to open their minds to any other way of thinking apart from the herd. So, and then there's the 20%, which is namely all of us who are the collective consciousness and what is termed conspiracy theorists. It's just such a low vibration terminology for somebody who critically thinks. And many people have lost the capacity or didn't even have the capacity to think critically. And this is what we're seeing right now. And that's an essential read. And I recommend that far and wide. And it's such a great book. I mean, he's such a oracle of knowledge around psychology and human behavior. And it explains everything that we're experiencing, because we're sometimes scratching our head. Why don't you see this? It's like the building's on fire. You're calling people out and they're just waving out the window at you whilst the house is going up in flames. That's that kind of analogy. But he perfectly describes it and makes it clear what's going on here with the psychology around this whole thing. And the whole thing, it's such a calculated, clever agenda. And it's so simple, but how it's been pulled off. But I don't think they're going to triumph second time around. You know, it's like, what's coming next? We've got this climate change agenda coming, carbon tax credits, you know, kind of all of these things combined, restricting travel. So, you know, less air travel and saving the planet, and the planet is doomed, and Greta Thunberg and all of these doom mongers. The planet is not doomed. Meanwhile, you have China and India, who are the world's largest polluters, continuing business as normal. And on the other hand here, you know, you've got the ULIS thing, the low traffic neighborhoods, the 15-minute cities in the UK and Ireland, driven and underpinned by this fear narrative of the climate change agenda, this other fear-based agenda to restrict us and to stealth tax and restrict movement and control. This is all based around control to drive society into an enslavement system.
Yeah, and because of, if you will allow it, there's a kind of they have an awareness. Not only are they profoundly evil and unempathetic, they are also highly intelligent. So they understand that they are karmically culpable for this. So they have a thing called revelation of the method, where they actually tell us that they're going to do all of this.
Yeah.
So you can look up public websites and see this is exactly what the agenda is, and this is what we're going to do. And then in the Hollywood movies, they reduce, or should we say, they reveal the agenda for these sort of psychological operations and these other sort of control dramas and psyops that they're going to actually unleash upon humanity and somehow get away with it.
Black Mirror. Yeah.
I stopped watching TV over 10 years ago. I don't buy and read newspapers. I don't even listen to the radio. Like anytime I go back over to England and the radio's on, it's just constant pumping out of adverts. The programming, and I turn it off and they say, "What's wrong with you? Why don't you want to listen to that? It's just the radio." And I'm like, man, I just have healthy boundaries when it comes to filtering, and it's so whether it's something I eat or something I listen to, and I don't give them permission to just advertise to me 24/7. If I can just have a radio where there's just music, and not like the news. As soon as the newsreader comes on, it's like, today people died. But I can tell you what the news is going to be. Someone died, someone got shot, someone got stabbed. Out of the 999,000 women that went home in Dublin last night, one of them ended up at the bottom of a canal somewhere, and you won't hear about all the ones that got home safe. It's just this constant. And so, like, they've done the behavioral psychologists know that if they repeat the lie often and often enough, it'll filter into people's subconscious and they'll believe it, and they end up believing their own lies as well. You mentioned a guy there with the science of totalitarianism, and it got me thinking about the experiments of Stanley Milgram in the 60s. Did you see where he brought people into a room and he said, I've got a guy in the next room and he's hooked up to an electric shock machine.
Yeah.
And if you answer these questions wrong, you need to administer this shock.
Mm.
And like 8 and 9 out of 10 people would actually administer the shock. Now, he was acting in the next room. He was screaming. He wasn't actually getting shocked because he was on the experiment. But a very few number of people said, no, I'm not doing this. It's wrong. I don't agree with administering a painful shock to the person next door because he didn't know that the capital of Egypt was Cairo. This kind of shit, you know. But the amount of people, like, he just had a clipboard and a pen and paper and a white coat. And it was this obedience to authority.
Yeah.
So they know this already. The behavioral psychologists know all this stuff. They're going to get 8% obedience.
The Tavistock Institute and the Nudge Unit, which has all come to light. But there are millions of us who are not going to comply. We didn't comply first time around. We stood our ground on a number of issues, and we're not going to comply a second time around, whatever they try to impose upon us, whether it's this climate agenda or whether it's a new scary variant. Ooh, there's a scary variant coming. No fear, no fear. Non-compliance, that's all it takes. Do not comply. As David Icke said in 2020, do not acquiesce. Do not acquiesce to this tyranny. That's all it takes. And it's that simple. If we don't comply, it's over for them.
Yeah.
But we've got a long way to go. And I think this next onslaught in the winter, there's going to be another drive. They're going to be in for a big surprise, because people aren't going to have their lives stripped away and denied the right to work and support their families and all this orchestrated, as they term it, cost of living crisis. No, this is corporate wealth transference in full swing. That's what this is about. It's not a cost of living crisis. That's how they packaged it up with the terminology. Oh, it's a crisis. It's a crisis. It's a crisis. That's a crisis. This is fear, crisis. There is no cost of living crisis at all. It's orchestrated corporate wealth transfer.
So I'm just going to jump in a bit on you there, Danny, and say, with regards to the way things are going, you can see how they've been gearing up towards this Agenda 2030, and whilst they fly in on their planes and dictate to us all, what we should eat and where we should go and what we should do, there's a certain sort of, it's no longer a fringe minority, it's a hardcore chunk of people that are just saying, nah, sorry, not going along with that. Nah, sorry, not watching the news, not buying into the fear porn. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Numbers are growing, aren't they? That's the thing,
Well, look, if you've got grannies dying in nursing homes, whilst there's nurses and policemen doing dance routines, and people, what on earth is going on there?
Yeah, never forget those dystopian dance routines. Yeah, what's going on here?
Insane. Crazy.
Aren't we we're supposed to be in the middle of a pandemic, and you're doing dance routines and have time to do that. You had the police in Ireland doing these ridiculous routines, the fire service, nurses and doctors. It was just so dystopian. So it's a ritual. It's a ritual. But unfortunately, people thought, they went along with it. It's just insanity. But yeah, never forget that. Never forget that.
Coming back to the questions I had, you preempted one. Which was, what are your favorite books and what books would you recommend to people and why? You mentioned the science of totalitarianism. Is there anything else jumping out? Any books that you read that changed your life, or anything that you feel would be worth recommending for anyone watching?
Laura Dodsworth, A State of Fear, is a great book, a reference book on everything that's happened over the last 3 years, and has become a bestseller, and it, I believe, is the definitive account of everything that happened here in the UK, and will be looked back upon with historians in the next decade and so on, and moving into the future. It's a very detailed thoroughly researched book. Laura is a great writer and a member of Together Declaration. I'm also she's one of the early signatories of Together Declaration, created by Alan Miller. It's a political campaign group that I continue to support. And it's the strongest political campaigning group out there, in my opinion. And I will continue to support Together Declaration as an ambassador.
Any sort of favorite movies or favorite songs? We touched briefly there before on the sort of musical influences when you were younger. I remember dancing around the living room when I was about 5 to a vinyl sort of album that my parents had of the soundtrack to Saturday Night Fever and the disco scene. And then I researched it a few years later when I had my own radio show, and I found out that the Bee Gees went from being kind of nobody had heard of them to, I think it was about the 4th or 5th album by the time they got some fame and stardom. And then they went to being boycotted. Radio 1 DJs wouldn't play their music, and they were told, so they went from kind of nothing to huge stardom, and then boom, crash. And your man, I think it was Maurice Gibb, went from, I think he was the only person to write a song that went to #1 in the hit parade in 5 consecutive decades. Would you believe? Unbelievable stuff.
Yeah. Death of disco. But
any favorite songs? Any favorite movies?
I've got thousands of favorite songs, but
one
that springs to mind is Harold Melvin and the Bluenotes, "Wake Up Everybody," because the message in that song is so appropriately perfect for now. It's such a perfect message and a song for these times that we are living in.
Harold Melvin and the Bluenotes.
People are waking up. They're waking up in the millions. And they know.
What was the song they did in the 80s that was covered by the Communards? Do you remember?
Which one?
Harold Melvin and the Bluenotes. Yeah, Don't Leave Me This Way.
Yeah,
the original's fabulous. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah.
But I've got so many books that I haven't had time to read. I collect books, but I just haven't had time to read them. I listen to audio books occasionally. I've even got kind of probably about 15 audio books that I still haven't got round to listening to, because a lot of my time is spent with music and campaigning and fighting this war that we are in. And it is a war. It's a spiritual war.
Thank you. Yeah, we're spiritual beings having, as Mark Atwood so succinctly coined the phrase, we're spiritual beings having a human experience, or we're kind of in this cosmic meat suit. And there was, I think it was an English philosopher called Gilbert Ryle quoted the phrase, "the ghost in the machine," right? We're very much on a soul journey. And once you're aware of this, you can start to sort of stop getting sucked into the ego trap of taking things personally. Yeah, a lot of the things that people say and do are nothing to do with us at all. We've no business taking things personally, and it's amazing how easily we can get triggered or sucked into these lower vibrational energies when you realize that the world is almost geared up to make us hurt, angry, upset, annoyed. You can take a step back from it and say, actually, I'm not taking part in this. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Yeah, I don't own a TV. I haven't owned a TV for probably 2 decades.
Yeah,
I used to read the Sunday newspapers. I don't waste my time reading that dross and all that propaganda any longer. It's all propaganda. So I've got better things to read and research and study, and this is where time is spent. Time is precious. Is our greatest commodity. So wasting time is not an option. We can have a limited time on in this lifetime, but it's maximizing every minute of the day and making every minute count and being grateful for that morning, on waking up to a new day and going to sleep last thing at night when we go into the other dimension in the sleep state. My belief, that is where we go when we pass away and we leave this vessel.
Yeah, so it's like when we sleep, when we're dead, it's like a dream that we don't wake up from. We're just in that kind of state of astral travel, but we're not embodied consciousness. We're kind of consciousness that's disembodied. So we're kind of floating there's no time and there's no space, because that's
Exactly.
just the physical dimension. Yeah.
And that experience is something that ayahuasca, the native Indian South American medicine that has been part of the culture of the ancient tribes of the Amazon since the beginning of time. And ayahuasca is a vehicle to being in that other dimension, in that realm where the soul is eternal and there is no time, there is no sense of consciousness. And that's part of that whole experience.
And there's no me, mine, and I.
No.
Yeah.
No.
It's like that ego drops and you're just connected to everything, right?
It's fascinating. Graham Hancock writes a lot about ayahuasca. Alex Gray, the leading psychedelic artist, I just feel that, you know, the medicine is something that the whole world needs right now. It connects us to source, who we are, who we truly are, that we have a soul, that the soul is eternal.
But there are ways to accessing that information without necessarily doing it through the
no, absolutely
route.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm not saying, you know, suggesting for one moment, and hey, you know, kind of, it's just, I'm just explaining that you know, that is a conduit to have that experience of around the soul and the disconnection of the conscious state and the soul. And that has given so much and continues to do with the ancient tribes, with the Amazonian tribes. It's part of their culture.
So
where the young members of the tribes are initiated into the jungle through the use of the medicine.
Yeah.
So they have no fear around the animals in the jungle, and what the environment around them all becomes one.
Yeah. I was just going to say, a couple of the gents in our Menscape group would be sort of well known and well sort of versed in both plant medicine and the sort of psychedelic experience, as well as the naturally growing psilocybin that we have here. We don't need to import anything from the Amazon when we've got an indigenous psychedelic. The microdosing with the psilocybin, or I think it's called the Liberty Cap, or just your magic mushrooms, you don't need to go crazy. And these naturally occurring substances facilitate us to connect not only with the earth and our environment, but also our higher selves, or the best version of ourselves on the soul level, you know? And especially in a society or in a world where we're constantly being dragged down into the reptilian brain and the lower vibrational energy, just like if you take, for example, alcoholism, the rates of success of curing alcoholism with psilocybin and microdosing on the magic mushrooms is huge.
Yeah, PTSD also with war veterans, and there are charities that are using psychedelics to overcome that trauma, post-traumatic stress traumas. So it has wide use and benefits, and in terms of a therapeutic method there. And if we look at Dr. GAbor Mate, the Canadian psychologist, he has a retreat in the Amazon. I only discovered this when I was reading up about him recently, because I was on a diploma, a 3-year diploma for humanistic counselling in London, and I was studying on a course. I found the academic side of it a real challenge,
right?
But I learned a great deal in that year. But unfortunately, I got to the year end and everything was going great. And a second submission of an essay, a transcript essay around a session, I had difficulties accessing the uploading the document to the website, and at 10 a.m. it shuts down. Now I couldn't get in before 10 a.m. because of this technical glitch, so I unfortunately didn't pass that module. But I just, I dusted myself down. I learned a great deal. I'm very passionate about psychotherapy, and it's all part of the journey. So I got disappointed for a few hours and thought, well, that's that's not meant to be for me right now. It's a 3-year diploma, and year 2 is even more intense. The studies, the commitment to those studies, the academic side with the essays, 5,000 word essays times 4 in year 2. Year 1, 2,500 words. I'd never written an essay in my life, but I wrote 4 essays, 4 2,500 word essays. So that's improved my writing skills, and the process of humanistic counselling, the Carl.J. model of therapy. And it's unfortunate, didn't go on to year 2, but maybe at some point in the future I'll go back and revisit that. But it wasn't an option for me to go back and start year 1 again, all over again, not with everything else I have going on in my life, with my music business and other business opportunities. And that door closed, and 3 doors opened up around that time.
I was going to say, Danny, if you came away from that just even with a knowledge of the work of Dr. GAbor Mate, in itself, that would be enough. Because I'm always keen to promote both his online lectures that he talks around the world, as well as his books.
Yes,
and his sort of theories and expertise and analysis on multi-generational trauma and addictions and therapies for addictions is something that I touch on with probably each and every one of my clients in the healing work I do through the Right Coach. It's all kind of connected to personal development. And when you see that you're not necessarily what happened to you, but who you chose to become, and how those events shaped how you became who you became. And then you see the way he defines addictions as a need for kind of self-soothing to medicate from, for example, childhood experiences where we didn't feel loved, or our voice wasn't heard, or we didn't feel like we were enough just as we are. It's very easy to escape through, whether it's sex, chocolate, alcohol, you name it,
drugs, vices, it's self-medication and escapism. But I've spent 6 years in therapy and will continue to go to therapy because I have grown so much, and it's really helped me through some very, very challenging, difficult times. And I'm so thankful that I committed to psychotherapy, and I have an incredible therapist who's in her 70s, has been a leader in the field, and she just is more private now about her work. And I'm blessed to have that in my life because it has totally transformed the way I live and who I am, and the understanding of who I am and how things form in childhood. We were practicing.
I'm giving you, wherever the webcam is there, I'm giving you fist pumps, because that exactly sums up part of my journey as well.
Right.
Seeing a spiritual teacher and counselor has transformed my life. Yeah.
And it does if you commit to it, and understanding why certain things happen in your life and how to cope with things, and transactional analysis is a model of psychotherapy, and that's what helped me greatly through childhood issues and experiences where everything forms from 2.5 to 5 years old to 7 years old. That's when everything forms. And some families are integrated, and others are not, and dysfunctional families. So there's a multitude of issues that can form in those formative years. And this is where the Eric Berne transactional analysis module really, really does get to the core of those experiences. And it's painful work having to revisit all of that. It's no walk in the park.
Re-traumatizing, yeah.
Oh, it's no walk in the park, but it gets better, and you learn and you grow and you develop through the process. And as I said, I'm really grateful that I made that commitment and continue to make the commitment, because a therapeutic relationship is having someone to talk to in a very neutral, open space, and the relationship takes time to develop over the course of the work. And that is a great experience. It's a part of my life and always will be.
Thank you. Yeah, very eloquently put. The kind of witness energy that comes to the table when we're being heard and we're being validated and we're able to speak our truth. My parents, thank God, they weren't bad people. They weren't nasty, but they both had 2 suitcases full of their own unhealed trauma from their own childhoods, shall we say?
Yeah.
From a time where there wasn't public knowledge of psychotherapy, there wasn't the books available, or there wasn't the internet, where they couldn't do the work on themselves because they weren't aware. They were just told to put up and shut up, you know?
Exactly, yeah.
And there's the pub. Go to the pub.
Self-medicate.
Yeah.
Self-medicate down the pub. Talk to your mates down the pub or your girlfriends. And that's how it's been culturally over many decades. But I think mental health and therapy and counselling, it's not a taboo subject, you know. I mean, if you go back 20 years or something, it's like, oh, you're seeing a shrink, you know, as if there was something wrong with you.
Right.
Well, most people have got some issues and carry them through the whole of their lives, and unfortunately don't get to understand that actually the same pattern re-emerges, forms again, and it's the same outcome. And some people can carry that through the whole of their lives without really truly getting to the core of it and saying, well, actually, I need to do something about this, because I'm really, you know, this is just happening over and over again. So what is it? What's causing this? But I think also, on the other hand, you know, psychotherapy is quite a misunderstood in wider society. I think it's still a little bit misunderstood, actually, what the process is and what the benefits are of psychotherapy.
Yeah, it's something I'm fascinated by myself. It's been part of my journey, and not just from an academic point of view, where I went off to Leeds to study psychology and philosophy, and that's when I ended up in Up Your Ronson and back to basics more than I did in university lecture. But the interest in sort of neuropsychology and the interest in kind of brain evolution and brain function and all of that stuff always fascinated me. But what I like about psychotherapy is it's got more of a practical application. It can be academic, but what GAbor is talking about in his books and in his talks is very, very real and practicable and practical information that we can take and translate into our day-to-day lives. And the more you do the work on yourself, the more you can kind of hold a space for others and forgive them, because you can see these control dramas and these childhood kind of traumas playing out. And if you're not careful, you'll end up in a relationship with someone where you're both vomiting your own unhealed trauma onto one another and calling it a relationship, you know?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it certainly does happen. And not very pleasant experience at all. But just one moment, I just want to give me a moment. So in terms of psychotherapy book, this book is a must read. In terms of it is the Bible of transactional analysis.
Yeah.
Ian Stewart and Van Jones. This one's second edition, but
Thank
this book here, this is the parent, adult, child model. So we have a parent state, an adult state, and a child state, the ego states. So it's about the alignment of these, and that encompasses everything, business, relationships, and it's a fascinating subject. It's fascinating. This particular model, rather than Gestalt, I like Gestalt, but I didn't fully kind of understand it. but I leaned more towards this because my process has been, you know, over the years based and centered around transactional analysis. So, yeah, it's a great book to read, to understand how these, you know, how issues form in childhood, our early formative experiences in life, which shapes these models of parent, adult, child state. Yeah, fascinating.
Cool. So moving away from books, what was your best trip abroad and why? Was there a holiday or an abroad experience that sticks out more than any of the others for you?
Goodness me. I've been very fortunate, traveled around the world countless times, not everywhere. I'd like to.
But you didn't go to the Antarctic because you can't get there.
Yes, that's another story, the ice wall and everything.
Why it's off limits. The ice wall, indeed. Yeah.
And why is it off limits? But yes, I really enjoyed Cambodia. I think Cambodia is a wonderful country.
Yeah.
Yeah. Angkor Wat, which is a wonder of the world, a historic center. It's on an energy ley line point. Fascinating history at Angkor Wat, all the ruins there in the jungle, and there's many more ruins that are still being discovered.
How long did you spend in Cambodia?
Oh, I've been there 4 times.
Right.
I have been there over the years 4 times, and it's just a really wonderful country. It's been through so much trauma with power, kind of the political turmoil that went on there, and the dictatorship, and the Pol Pot regime and all of that killing that went on there. It's just, but the Cambodian people are wonderful, and the culture there, and there's a real calm feeling in Cambodia, and it's a country that I love. I love a lot of Asia. I've traveled extensively through Asia, and I'm drawn towards Asia. I love the culture and the climate and the history and the people and Buddhism, and it's got a lot to offer, and the food.
I was in Sri Lanka and I was in Thailand, but I never got to either Japan yet or Cambodia and some of the other places. Burma fascinates me, but I think there's kind of a difficulty in being able to get there, and maybe Tibet and Nepal as well.
Yeah, I have wanted to go to Tibet, but it's still under Chinese occupation. And I think one of the greatest disappointments of recent times has been His Holiness the Dalai Lama kissing an 8-year-old boy on the stage and advocating the mRNA. To me, it's a great disappointment. I saw him as a hero, and
but this is the thing.
Major disappointment.
If you've any, shall we say, insight into the Bible studies or the biblical stuff, there's talk of an antichrist in the book of Revelation. If you tie that in with the Nostradamus quatrains and what have you, and other sort of sources of information, the Antichrist will come disguised as the most holy, loving, nice, and you couldn't imagine anyone being more suitable than the Dalai Lama himself to meet these criteria of fooling everyone into thinking they were this when they were this. And I thought Mother Teresa was great growing up, and then I read the thing about how she was either trafficking children or she was cruel to them, and so the public persona was totally at odds with the reality. I wonder with the Dalai Lama, I'm not saying he's the Antichrist, right, because that's a bit far out, but if you take what they're saying to expect from this kind of entity, then it's not going to be anyone who we think it is, because we're going to think that they're wonderful, right?
I think Bill Gates is a good contender for that title.
But there's no deception there, because his parents were involved in the Planned Parenthood and the genetic
eugenics.
And he's gone on record to say, if we do a good job, we can reduce the world population with a few more jabs here and there, and we'll, going back to AIDS in the 80s, they brought Fauci in then, and there was some dodgy stuff going down with what they were doing to people in Africa. And if you start connecting the dots and doing the research, things very quickly don't look kosher, when it comes to the official narrative of what's going on. But yeah, I was quite shocked at the Dalai Lama. I'd already kind of fallen out of sort of the general sort of kudos towards him. Just once it became evident he was on board with the globalists, and one of them,
Well, that's the thing. Hugely disappointing. And we're internationalists. We're not globalists. This globalist, unelected body of these entities, it's a globalist coup d'etat going on. They've infiltrated everything. Kind of the political establishments are infiltrated by them. Rishi Sunak is a paid up WEF like puppets. Sadiq Khan, they're all WEF.
They're lower level ones, the ones that you see.
Well, they're lower level puppets.
They're lower level puppets because you see them in the public arena. It's the ones behind the scenes, really. There was something just popped in there about the sort of true identity of these beings and who they are and what they are. Do you remember in the 90s when Tony Blair came to power on the crest of a wave with this new Labour, and thousands of people turned out on the streets and waved flags and said this was the heralding of a new dawn? This fucker was just a Tory in fucking... He was a Tory in Labour clothing. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing, man.
He's a dangerous man, Blair, and this is the thing. He's still like walking about freely and lauding it up with this title and that title, and pushing for digital identity and the other thing as well. Kind of the injections and so on. Blair is, he is a criminal.
He just looks evil. Like if you're talking about someone, an antichrist candidate, there.
There's another candidate there.
It's like how
absolutely
like these people that are catapulted into the public arena. They're very much molded and puppets. I did some reading up on our friend Mr. Hussein, who became the president of America, and you couldn't believe what you were reading. The discrepancy between these people saying this is how it is, and then the public perception and people thinking this guy's the greatest thing since sliced bread, where he's started more wars than any other American president and gone back on all of his promises.
And got the Nobel Peace Prize for dropping more bombs than any other American president.
What? Like, where's the integrity of the Nobel Peace Prize anymore?
Absolutely. It's also corrupt, and it's all an illusion. This is like we're living in this real dystopian, weird movie where all of these people, these figurehead characters on the stage, like Biden and all of these people, and Zelensky and all of them, Blair, all of them, all these puppets. It's just they're all like they're all the actors in this whole dystopian film, aren't they? They're all kind of...
But you can see it now, whereas in the past, it's like you say, we're in the time now where there's like the lifting of this veil, and we can see these beings for what they are.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Unfortunately, we can. But there's still a lot of people who are in denial and cannot, or just are so in fear that they refuse to see that. That's what's going on here. It's a very bizarre time we are living in, but I think it's a really great historic time we're living in, and we keep our vibration high. We stand in love and in the truth. This is about standing in the truth and in the light, and they are not going to triumph. They will not triumph. The world is going to be all right at some point, and I believe 2025 is that this is going to be a major turning point in this whole battle and this whole war. And I do believe that period in 2025 is when this whole thing is going to come crashing down.
I'm worried that we're running out of time, Danny, and I've taken up enough of your time as it is already, man. But it's great to hear from you and connect with you. I've got a 1-minute quickfire round, which I'm going to save. Before I ask you about that, have you got a glitch in the Matrix story? Was there anything that happened that made you double sort of take and think, hang on a minute, that totally distorted your view of reality? You mentioned about ayahuasca, and was it an experience like that that got you to sort of question the reality that we're presented with and that we're programmed to believe in?
No, the reality for my own personal journey was being made bankrupt in 2017,
Right.
and the fraud that went on with Clydesdale National Bank of Australia. This happened in Ireland, Europe, with an American vulture fund called Cerebus Global, who are a ruthless, cutthroat organisation that absolutely cleared so many people out, businesses and individuals. It's all over the internet. You can see that. So that really, really opened my mind to the corruption that is ongoing in this world, driven by banks. And this is what they're doing now on stealth with the interest rates rises. They're trying to force us into a digital currency, keep paying in cash every day. And you can go in a post office counter and pay your council tax or whatever bill, your gas bill, whatever it may be, your water bill, over the counter in a post office, go to the ATM, draw out the cash, just keeping that cash in circulation. You've got other pessimistic people. Oh, this is the way of the future. But this is all based around convenience culture. Pay with your watch, pay with your phone. Don't queue up at a till point with the human.
They can introduce whatever they know.
Go and do the work of the supermarket and make the supermarket corporations more money by doing that work on a self-service till, which therefore artificial intelligence and people are losing jobs. So the workforce is cut down. All of this is all part of this wider agenda, but we can fight back, and we are fighting back. I attend a lot of outreaches, have done over the last 3 years, where we're raising awareness in the local towns here. The town I live in is very aware of the cash issue. We've leafleted all the shops and businesses, and a lot of the shops have the cash flyers up in and they are now asking, would you like to pay in cash? So we are making a difference, and this is the thing. We have to hold the intention that we are making a difference, and we have to keep the pressure up. We are not going to comply to this digital identity, because the digital identity is the crux of all this. It's the bedrock, the foundation to make the social credit system work and the digital currency. Without the digital identity, it's not going to happen. So we've got to raise this awareness. We've got to fight back, and we will overcome this, because we are free sovereign beings, and we will not be enslaved. We will not be led into an enslavement system driven by these corporations and these evil entities. That's effectively, simply, that's what it's about here. You know, they do not want us to be entrepreneurial. They do not want us to have the freedom that we have enjoyed over many, many years. Tightly restricting, putting more restrictions on. But all of this is where I focus my energy on, particularly around the digital identity and the digital currency and the social credit system that is based on the Chinese model. We're not Chinese. We don't want to be Chinese. With the greatest respect to the Chinese people, they're living through hell in a totalitarian state under the CCP. That's not for us. So these politicians and these self-entitled so-called elite can jog on, because we are not going to comply to any of it. And we have to stand our ground and stand there fearlessly. And that's the way we beat these people.
My 1 minute quick fire round seems very insignificant after that nice little sort of encouraging speech there. So I'm not going to bother with it. So all I've got time for really to do is to thank you for being a guest on the Menscape podcast. I'll put this out on social media once I've shared it with you to make sure you're happy with it. And we will, keep fighting the good fight, turning the sunny side out, listening to our music and supporting one another through togetherness and love. We are divine beings manifest by the grace of God. We're sovereign beings, and we have our free will, and we're free to choose what we comply with and obey. And our self-sufficiency is paramount. Our ability to grow our own food and to speak our truth. And like you say, to overcome fear. It's like we're all going to go, we're all on a one-way ticket, we're all going to go out at some stage. So you might as well do it standing in your power.
Be present to the present. Do not live your life in fear, and laugh. And also plan your future. They stole 2 years of our lives. Our dreams were like suppressed. They'd stolen 2 years of our lives. They're never going to steal 2 years or 1 year or 1 month of our life anymore. Hold your intention and live your life full on a daily basis to the best of your ability, and don't get overshadowed by fear. Raise the vibration and think about the future that you want for yourself and your children, because it's not the future they're trying to shape for us. It's not going to happen.
Thanks again, Danny. Mind yourself and take care, and God bless, sir.
God bless you too. Been nice talking to you.
Buddies came to say hi as well.
Oh, doggykins.
Good lad. He just wants to go out for play bat and ball.
Menscape, the podcast with Carl.J. Ashley.